UFC 273 is just days away at this point, and the entire fight card is absolutely loaded. So today, I want to talk about the three biggest bouts on the card and some of the more interesting numbers and statistics behind them. Hey y'all, I'm Luke Thomas. I'm one half of the Morning Kombat hosting duo. As always, if you like this, please give the video a thumbs up. If you love it, consider subscribing. All right, formalities and all that nonsense out of the way. Let's dig in. Let's start, in fact, with the main event. UFC featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski puts his title on the line against the Korean zombie Chan Sung Jung. Volkanovski is looking to tie Max Holloway at 145 with 3 defenses, while Jung is hoping to score the biggest win of his career. So, what do the numbers tell us? Here's something to pay attention to on Saturday. At least on paper, there isn't a huge difference in their physical dimensions. A look at the tail of the tape shows Chan Sung Jung is a bit rangier and taller, but nothing huge. I'd say personally it looks like Jung can reach a little further than what the numbers here suggest, but Volkanovski is often the shorter or smaller fighter in his bouts. The reach could matter a lot, but it wouldn't be a new thing for the champ. Speaking of which, one of the more noteworthy features of the champ's game is its suppressive effect on his opponent's offense. Whatever their baselines are for performance, be it strikes landed, takedowns secured, or even just plain offensive volume, Volkanovski's ability to feint, trick, and move renders his opposition to much less active and even dangerous versions of themselves. The Korean zombie should be landing about 20 clean, significant strikes a round. Now that's difficult to count in real time, and live stats can sometimes be a bit unreliable, but try to use the eye test. See if zombie is throwing and landing enough. Is he securing a relatively normal amount of volume, or is it noticeably less? Is he hanging out a lot waiting for something to open up? Even if Volkanovski isn't landing with a ton of authority, if he's keeping a numerical lead on the South Korean fighter, that could be difficult for him to overcome. Now that said, if Zombie is able to secure takedowns or counter-strike with regularity, that will already mean Volkanovski is having trouble implementing his normal game. Also, don't forget, while Volkanovski's takedown success rate is low at just 34% according to Fight Metric, he is still good for 1.7 takedowns per 15 minutes. The Aussie is consistent about attempting a lot of takedowns even just for misdirection, if not to complete the takedown itself. Pay attention to how often Volkanovski goes for a takedown, and when he does, what does he do with it? Was it just to change position, open up for strikes? We'll see. All of those details matter. Which, of course, brings us to the co-main event. The bantamweight title rematch between now champion Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan can't really be reduced to what the numbers tell us, given the complexity of their styles and fluidity of dimensions that both routinely move in and out of. So let's take a quick peek at the tail of the tape. Now, as you can see, Yan is a bit younger than Sterling, but Sterling has a 4-inch reach advantage. Also, while Yan is more of a stance switcher of the two, Sterling does it a fair bit and did so in their first fight. So, getting to that fight, there are a couple of trends to also pay attention to here. For starters, Yan is a devastating puncher. Among all bantamweights, he's the all-time UFC leader in knockdowns. By contrast, Sterling isn't even in the top 15 in that specific ranking. Yan is also 8th all-time among bantamweights for knockdowns per 15 minutes with 1.09. So if the bout goes 3 rounds, Yan is typically good for 1 knockdown and maybe then some. This also tracks with what we saw in their first fight, where Yan was able to score a knockdown in just the first round with his boxing. In fact, in looking at the numbers compiled from their first fight, a few other features stand out. Sterling has a much average shorter fight time with 12 minutes and 24 seconds. Yan, by contrast, is at 15 minutes and 14 seconds, which puts him 3rd all-time among bantamweights for average longest fight time. Kind of goes without saying, Yan likes to take his time, and a 5-round bout suits his game pretty well. When we look at the striking stats from the first fight, more details also emerge. In the first 2 rounds, Yan could only score 14 and then 10 significant strikes in their first and second rounds, respectively. That ballooned to 30 in round 3 and 32 in round 4, despite that last frame being abbreviated due to the illegal knee. Might be fair to say, like we said, there's simply no denying this kind of longer outcome favors the Russian. As for Sterling, though, his career numbers speak to his status as a tested veteran and very skilled grappler. Look at these bantamweight figures as a testament to that. Sterling is 8th all-time in having the most fights, tied for 2nd in total wins, tied for 7th in finishes, tied for 3rd in total submissions, 4th in total control time, 4th in total strikes landed, 3rd in positive strike differential, 10th in takedowns, 5th in submission attempts, and 4th in win streaks. Folks, if that isn't the definition of elite, nothing is. But here's the rub. Sterling only scored 1 takedown on Jan in their first meeting over 17 attempts. Meanwhile, Jan went 7 for 7 on his takedowns. I'm not saying that Sterling would have to get the other 16 to beat Jan, but clearly having more success in that department where his stats and frankly his skills are the strongest can only help to put all of his offense together. And as I discussed on MK, I do think there might be a case for Sterling to not worry about the takedown and holding it, but instead aim to use the takedown as a facilitator of a big strike opportunity. We'll see how that goes. Last, and certainly not least, we get to the feature fight of the card. Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev. As previously explained, this welterweight bout is truly historic in nature, and the numbers here are weird for precisely that reason. If we look at the tail of the tape, for instance, Burns has more than double the MMA experience, which should count in his favor. Additionally, Chimaev's average fight time is less than a round. Burns will also be at a height and reach disadvantage, but like Volkanovski, that's somewhat common in his career too. Those numerical differences aren't all that unusual, at least not compared to these next ones. For example, Burns' striking differential is positive, but not super exemplary. And granted, Chimaev only has 4 UFC fights, but look at his striking differential. 8.68 strikes landed per minute versus 0.08 strikes absorbed per minute. Honestly, folks, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before. Now, over the course of his career, this differential will likely narrow, and perhaps by a lot. But as far as crazy fight statistics go, that's right up there with the craziest of them. And frankly, the grappling game stats are pretty wild too, although maybe a little bit less crazy than the striking one. So for example, Chimaev is good for 2 of 3 attempts on takedowns. And while his takedown defense obviously is pretty good, it's also largely untested. Burns' takedown accuracy and defense is somewhat low when we're talking about numbers, but his relentlessness in pursuit of them kind of makes up for it. So he scores 2.16 takedowns per 15 minutes. If we're looking at the stats for elite MMA grapplers in this particular context, that's a very solid figure. One more note on that fight. The stats don't directly speak to this, but Chimaev's size advantage should not be overlooked. Now, when I say that Chimaev has a size advantage, I realize they'll be on the scale at roughly the same weight 24 hours before the fight itself. What I'm saying is Chimaev is naturally bigger and even athletically fits well up a weight class. It's still not totally clear which division will be Chimaev's best long term, but there's no question he'll be the naturally stronger athlete than Burns when they lock up. His punching power is obviously no joke as well. So, what will matter in the end? Which statistical insight best predicts the outcomes of these tremendous fights? You tell me in the comments and make your case. I would love to see them, and I will read them. Either way, UFC 273 is almost here, and I honestly can't wait. So, until next time, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy the fights.